It's nice to be back in.
Muted.
Hi everyone. I think some people are still watching the US TV evening.
You going to come and show the computer with me, or we're going to come in here?
No, keep that one going in case it
Oh, okay.
in case it collapses. This one collapses.
All right, then. So I'll shut this door, okay?
You are co-host, David. Okay.
Am I?
Yeah.
Shouldn't Russell be?
Well, when he's, I've got both of you. So, well, I will do when he arrives.
Is the Israel thing still going on?
It was. They were just finishing. Well,
They finished.
are they finished? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to get people. I might mute myself.
Everybody else.
You can't do anything until Russell shows up, can you?
It's like a lull before the storm. Just wait.
Are you chasing him?
No, I'm sure he'll go and lose the way.
Maybe he's forgotten.
Not since this morning.
I never realised that so many Belmont people could stay silent for so long.
Don't spoil it, David.
Joy.
I just want to know what time it starts because I'm in Israel and it's nearly 25 to 11.
We should be starting any minute.
Hi, David. Hi, everyone.
Hello, Carol.
I didn't come on because I'm still finishing our dinner. We're a bit late in starting tonight. So, hello, I'm looking forward. Okay, I'm now going to switch off. Oh, better put it on mute, I suppose. Yeah.
Russell's not hiding anywhere, are you, Russell? I can't see you.
I've just sent him a text. If not, I'll have to make it up. I'll sing instead.
Why is it so slow?
Well, it's in
Wasn't that intentionally, Dave?
in the silence. I'll say hello to New York, to my son, aka known as Rabbi Dr. Dov Lerner, who
Oh, hello.
who got his PhD a couple of weeks back.
Mazel tov.
And he's selling the film rights.
True.
Right. Has Russell shown up yet?
No. No. Sure he will.
I'm about to call him. I'm about to call him.
Have to go, Ollie. Bye.
No, everybody else is, because they're all on.
The program literally has just finished.
Well, there you go.
Okay.
Everybody else is on.
Well,
See-
may well be.
See you in a second, Russell. Bye.
Yeah, just give me a time to have a pee as well.
Oh, my Lord. Everybody can hear this. Russell will just be a minute. Whilst we're waiting, Dov, do you want to tell us a little bit about what's going on in America, reactions, both to the Israel situation and the pandemic we're up to in New York?
I mean, not really is the answer to that.
Yes, I don't care. I've now put you on. What's going on in terms of New York?
We're trying to get through the days. That's what's going on.
Oh, that's tough. As it are things loosening in terms of requirements in regards to the pandemic?
Yes, we've now determined that if you're vaccinated, you no longer have to mask in public, outdoors, indoors. And that's now on a voluntary basis.
And how has your shul structured itself in terms of this need?
Well, there's a men's area and a women's area.
Good. So you ended up at the right shul. Good. Yes. And then what?
We were having registration where there's an unvaccinated section and a vaccinated section, which is sticking. And some are taking precautions and want to keep masking, even if they're vaccinated. We're now at a point where 99% of people are vaccinated.
Wow.
So things are starting to ease up.
Is the centre of the city filling up at all? People going in?
I've no idea. They only opened up yesterday,
Mhm.
and we've been somewhat occupied with the political situation.
Mhm.
Um,
Has there been any sort of unpleasantness locally?
well, my kids were pretty rude last night.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And my neighbor threw something over the fence, but other than that,
Oh, I got a neighbour like that too.
I did think when I clicked on the link, I would hear you being grilled rather than get grilled myself. But
Well, there you go. I just wanted people to have a flavour of what was going to happen. You know, your father, I'm a bit of a gorilla. You want to share what your community did for its Tickle and Ale What, in case Belmont wants to follow up on that one at 3 o'clock in the morning.
oh, we had a barbecue. Yeah, that was nice.
At 3 o'clock in the morning.
Always a good time for a barbecue.
What was served?
Ah, hello, Russell.
Oh, Russell.
Bye-bye.
Oh,
Nice
where are
to
you?
see you.
Oh, I haven't got you, Russell. Where are you?
I'm here.
No, I know you're here. I need to find you.
Oh, well, that's all right then.
Hold on. Well, these things are supposed to be in alphabetical order.
Now that's only obituaries.
Charming.
I'll get you in a minute.
The JC organises them every week. People always die in alphabetical order.
Hello?
I can read it. Yeah.
Hello? Hello?
There you are, Russell. Okay, there you go.
Right.
Right, you are a co-host, Russell.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Okay, are we good to go? With 47 devices, that sounds wonderful. Okay, so finally, good afternoon. No, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this third in the series of the Desert Island Discs. When I was asked to introduce David for this week's Desert Island Discs, my first reaction was, of all the members of our community, David probably needs the least introduction. David, you've had an impact on so many areas of your life: the building, the inside of the building, the outside of the building, the services, the youth activities, programming, just to name but a few. You've done so much to make Belmont what it is today. It gives me great pleasure to hand over to Russell, and we look forward to listening to your choice of Desert Island Discs. Thank you.
Barbara, thank you very much. I would have shaved, but there were no electric points on the island, so I couldn't do anything about it. Okay. Barbara Maslier, as host, you need to mute everybody except Russell and I.
I can't see anybody.
Oh.
Okay.
Russell, you can unmute yourself.
I have done. I have
Excellent.
done. Valerie, I don't know how to help you except to suggest that your video feed is not working. You might want to try going out and coming back again, or using another device, but I'm not the world's expert at technology. If the rest of everybody could stay muted, that would be helpful. I'm actually going to share my screen. I've done this before.
No.
Put it on, please.
Morris Minsky, mute. Michelle, help him.
The irony is, I've got the wrong PowerPoint presentation. Can you believe, Barbara? I've got yours for next week. Amazing. Hey, here we go. Could have been very embarrassing. But thank you all for your patience. Okay. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Desert Island Discs with our guest of honor today, David Lerner. I'm going to start with an apology, and that's that the proper Belmont interviewer was tied up this evening. Don't know what he's been up to, but I hope I'll be able to do as good a job as he did for the first two programs in the series. Now, David Lerner always starts by asking his subjects to tell us about their childhood, their school days, their early family life, where you were brought up. So David, let's start with this. Tell us about your early days, your childhood, your school, your early family life, and so forth.
Thank you, Russell. I was born in the London hospital, so probably within the sound of Bow Bells. So I'm probably a Cockney. Mum and Dad moved around a great deal. Dad was a manager at Curry's in fact, that's almost where he ended his working life over many years. And so we were in Liverpool, Manchester, Tottenham, Wembley, basically all the Premier teams, or at least the European Super League, until we got to Kenton in 1958. It was, they were not well off, affluent. They weren't affluent as we were growing up, really. And I was a very ill child, and that stays with me in gratitude for what I do have. But Mum and Dad were told I had a 5% chance of getting through the night. Back in when I was 4 years old, I was in the last polio epidemic in this country. I was in an isolation hospital, and things went wrong in the hospital actually as well. So I was really quite ill, and a friend of mine many years later analyzed statistically which people become psychiatrists, and he looked at all kinds of influences, ethnicity, religion, all kinds of. The only statistical association he could find was childhood illness. And whilst I didn't become a psychiatrist, it was an important part of my early career. The families themselves come from Lodge, well, it's spelt Lodge, but it's pronounced Wooge, and Lonza, very pious, very observant family members. And you'll see some of them. There's my great-grandfather, Gunnar Aaron Lerner, and that's the shul he davened in Lodge, the Wolwarska synagogue. And he actually lived until 1941, died of starvation in the Lodge ghetto, but it was to an extent a natural death. And his burial is recorded in the Lodge cemetery in 1941. So it wasn't a sort of part of a mass murder. And his son, my grandfather, which is the gentleman on the right there, the taller gentleman, left Poland to Germany, which was a great move, it turned out. And on the left-hand side are my maternal grandparents. And my grandfather was basically of Irish stock, and they migrated to Liverpool, although he was actually born in Chelm in Poland. And I always grew up thinking, like from the stories of Chelm, that it wasn't a real place, but there are actually 6 different places in Poland called Chelm, and my grandfather was one of those. My grandfather on the right fled Poland to Germany to avoid the draft in World War I, and to an extent probably that the story goes that my grandfather on the left Ireland to avoid being drafted into the IRA as the Irish Republic, the move to the Irish Republic got underway. So but that's lovely photographs of them, and actually when I look at them, they look much more affluent than the reality. So people must have somehow or another, whether it's from a Gemacht or something, managed to get some decent clothes together to have a wedding. And what we got next, some more wedding photos, Russ. And on the left is Sydney and Ruth. And on the right, my parents, really a childhood romance. They were 19 years old when they were married. They met on a training farm, the David Eder training farm, with loads of Habonim youngsters preparing to go to Israel. They got married in 1946. They chose not to go to Israel. They felt that they couldn't leave my grandparents behind, who had managed to get here, thank God, and they couldn't let them as refugees without any English, which they never really grasped, start off again in this country without support. So Mum and Dad never made it to Liverpool. My mother, if she's not watching now, but she would all like you to know, she was married at Greenbank Drive Shul in Liverpool, and she was Shul secretary and married by Reverend Sam Wolfson. And I mention that because she tells me every Friday night. So I'd like to get that one in there. And very distinguished looking Ruth and Sydney, without whom I wouldn't have my lovely Barbara. So there we go. You got any other wedding photographs there, Russell?
Well,
that's not a wedding photograph. That's me.
But I wanted to share this with everybody simply because I felt that this was at least something akin to what you were about in your latter teenage days. But
actually, that was when I was at Teachers Training College, and I was 29 years old, and by then my hair was a lot shorter than it had been at university, and I didn't have a beard and looked like a wild wolf man, as somebody once said.
Well, you know, in those earlier days, just tell us a little bit about growing up in Kenton. I know you were part of an organisation called Jives.
Yes, Jives, Jewish Youth Voluntary Service, which absolutely nothing to do with Kenton. Well, it was the Kenton group. Stanmore, Kenton, Edgware, Jives. You're right, Skedge. We had an amazing leader. I'm so glad you raised Jives, called Dr. John Cohen. Where he got the time to lead us and be a doctor and a parent. But he really introduced us to social services. He introduced us to care. He took us to really interesting places, hospitals for people with mental health issues, introducing us to those ideas and normalizing it. A work camp in France as the Soviets invaded Czechoslovakia, and we actually brought 2 Czechoslovaks back with us on the train to help them. And we decorated people's homes. Health and safety, you wouldn't be able to do what we were doing in those days.
I'm sorry to cut across you. I'm in danger of making a big mistake, but I am pretty sure that same Dr. John Cohen is a former relative of Melinda.
Correct, he is.
So
he was Wanda's husband. He was an amazing man.
Yeah, and those are the days.
He worked with.
And do you keep up? Do you keep up with your friends from your Jives days?
A few of them. Just sort of flicking through. Yeah, Madeline and Rick. Madeline from Kenton. Well, she was at Kenton from Hampstead. Actually,
Madeline Abramson.
Madeline Abramson. Yeah, was one
Very
that was
good.
Involved. Yeah.
So we're going to come to your first piece of music, the Beatles' "Here Comes the Sun." So what is the significance of that?
Well, firstly, as I warned you, Russell, I chose 6 pieces of music because I like them. Secondly, we all go through dark times, whether it personally or individually. And I thought the Beatles were refreshing for that era before they got into heavy drugs. And whenever you're feeling a bit low, you should know that the sun is round the corner. It's a part of the cycle of Jewish life. And it's hopefully we always get from the down bits to the up bits. So I've always thought about that, things will get better if they're tough. If you've got obstacles, we'll get over them. Here comes the sun, as it does every day.
Wonderful.
Here comes the sun. comes the sun, I say it's alright. Little lonely, it's been a long, cold, lonely winter. Little lonely, it feels like since it's been there. Here comes the sun, here comes the sun, I say it's alright.
I think, if you don't mind, as the hour is late, I'll cut it off in its prime. I'm going to move to a section that I've sort of called university, early working days, and so forth. So, David, were you the first in your family to go to university?
Russell, I was the first in my family, as you know, asking the question. I was the first person to go to high school. Before the war, there weren't that many high schools. Mum went to an all-through school, the Hope Place Liverpool Jewish Day School. Dad, of course, had his education completely disrupted, having been born in Germany. He went to JFS as a refugee boy and was evacuated in 1939. He vowed never to speak a word of German as he landed in this country. And so he had to learn English very quickly. And I think he was made class monitor of the refugee boys because he was the first one to get a grip on his English. So I was the first one to go to high school. And I think, I look back, I'm glad we had this photograph of my Zayda, my grandfather. It was a triumph of his decision to leave Germany. He'd been interned on Kristallnacht. He saw what bastards the Nazis were. He knew we had to get out. And I say we, because I feel like I was there with him in a way. And I still moves me thinking about showing Bubba and Zayda around my university campus and what they had achieved for us and what parents and grandparents will do to advance their children. So that was a wonderful, so it was wonderful for me, and in a way, more for my parents and my grandparents. The triumph was in many, many ways theirs. Then I had developed an early interest in childhood autism, and from a seemingly chance remark by a class teacher when I was 14, and I started reading the works of a gentleman called Bruno Bettelheim, who had written about the concentration camp experience because he had been in one before the war broke out, and tried to make some sense of it. And it was the first time, having read much about the Holocaust, that I got some kind of rationality about something about the experience, and then learned that he'd written about autism. And I wrote to him and I used exactly the right words, which were, I think you're brilliant, can I come and work with you? And that was the job interview, over and done with in a letter. And so I went to Chicago to work with autistic children. I had no idea how long for.
Pause you there, David. I'm going to start just to
look at that.
Show the love of your life.
And
we'll come back to Chicago in a minute.
Yeah, that's kind of out of sequence. It was Barbara and you, between you, have moved around the photographs. That's me in the East End, by the way. I think that's the back of Blythe Street, which no longer exists, demolished by the Greater London Council. And that's my lovely Barbara on her wedding day, hoping against hope that she'd made the right decision. You can see her looking in the flowers thinking, what have I done?
Now, you talked about your grandparents and showing them round the campus. For those who don't recognise the St Edmund's College, Oxford, this is where our subject this evening had his first session of tertiary education.
St Edmund Hall, it was known as the Rugby College. And I still remember going up for an interview, got the train at Paddington, and there were 3 chaps on the train who failed to get in the previous year to university, and they were very posh public school boys. Oh, where have you applied to, old chap? So I said, oh, St Edmund Hall. Oh, Teddy Hall. They'll throw a rugby ball at you, and if you catch it, you'll get in. And if you throw it back, you'll get a scholarship. And I thought, crikey, these guys really know who they're at and where they're at. And it was only afterwards I realized that they were trying for the second time because they'd failed to get in, and I wouldn't have to catch a rugby ball. Although I did want to play hockey for my college, when the captain came up to me and said, we need a man for the team and the game starts in 10 minutes. And I said, I've never played in my life. He said, get changed, run around and get in the way. So I played hockey for my college, just the once. But it was 4 wonderful years. I started doing politics, philosophy, and economics, didn't enjoy the politics or the economics. And I switched to what was human sciences, which was the first multidisciplinary degree in the country. And it taught me to try and look at a problem from every single angle. And it also, something that stayed with me, I hope, is to know for certain that you never can be sure you're right about anything. And you have to listen to other people, even Barbara occasionally, and you have to accept that the only person who's right about anything, let alone everything, is God. And the rest of us, we do our best, but certainty always bemuses me. And to a degree, I learned that at university, thinking about the many different angles to look at a problem from.
So you then moved to Chicago, and you started to tell us about your desire to move to Chicago. So you went to the University of Chicago. You didn't do 1 MA there, you did 2.
Well, yeah, doesn't everybody? I started out.
Is this anything to do with the university?
Yeah, yes. The building on the right is the school where I worked. A yellow door, not a coincidence. It was like the yellow star. Proud, the battle line, proud to be Jewish, and to the children. That was the dining room, and that was the murals on the front. Maybe it's connected with the shul. I haven't thought about this very much, but Bettelheim was determined that our young children should have the best of everything, and he used to comb Europe and America looking for antique furniture, which nobody did that with children who were throwing temper tantrums and autism. But he said, you have an obligation to create a beautiful environment. He commissioned works of art from top artists in Chicago. Whereas in most mental health institutions, I don't know if it's still true, you had plastic plates that they wouldn't break. He chose the best crockery, and we never had a broken plate. We told the kids, this environment is here for you and to respect you. And that I went there in 73, and I still am in weekly touch with some of my boys who are now in their 60s, and some of them have done very well, thank the Lord. And it's a pleasure to see them in New York and Chicago when I go there.
So Barbara told me that you not only took an MA in education, you took an MA in witchcraft. What's that all about?
Well, I had done some anthropology, and I thought I'd try and broaden my horizons. So I did an MA in anthropology with a view to doing a PhD, and the study was witchcraft. And I used to joke that I dedicated it in honor of my mum, but I didn't really do that. But when I got to the end of it, I realized it wasn't going to take me anywhere professionally. I couldn't do a PhD because I would have to go off somewhere into Africa for a few years, and I had no desire to do that. And so I switched to doing a degree in educational administration. I don't know whether there were such degrees in the UK at the time. And that introduced me to education law and education finance. And again, it was trying to give me a broader perspective of understanding the needs of an institution or an infrastructure. And that was, it was hard. It was working long hours with some pretty crazy kids who weren't easy to absorb all that they handed out. And at the same time, going to classes and writing papers, which was a very different style than England, because you only didn't do a paper every week or two. You did one term paper, 20, 30 pages long. And in those days, it was on a typewriter or handwritten. You couldn't, if you made a mistake, you couldn't correct it. So it was a real challenge to do research and to bring it together. and put it together in a cogent form.
So little did we know at the time, way back in 1979, as you came to the end of your time in Chicago, that life in education within the UK was beckoning. And I believe you then studied at Roehampton.
I did, yes.
I
I did my PGCE at Roehampton, stayed in special ed for another 4 years, and by the end of it, I was in an institution that was out of control, actually, in Watford. Eventually, the head was suspended for having an inappropriate relationship, if I can put it like that, with most of the female staff and quite a few of the girls. It was a terrible, terrible place. And by then, I was tired and worn out. And there was an advert for the Secretary of the London Board of Jewish Religious Education, Zichrono Livracha. And so I went for that, having had the background in admin and stepping back into the Jewish community, which I had been not that engaged in from the time that I'd left Kenton.
Okay, just pause a little there.
Yeah.
You mentioned somebody called Barbara.
Yes.
Before. How did you meet?
It was a blind date. I'd been in America for 10 years. I had, most of my friends were married, dispersed. And so the younger brother of a friend of mine, I said, find me a wife. And he was very accommodating. And he did just that. He introduced me to Barbara. It was a courtship of great romance. Barbara was training as a doctor at the time. She was even more exhausted then than she is today. I remember taking her to Jack Straw Castle, or the Spaniards Inn, up in Hampstead, and her dozing off into her glass of cider. And I realized this was a great opportunity. So when she sort of woke up out of her reverie, I told her, by the way, I've just proposed to you and you just accepted. So it was by far the easiest way to do it.
If you
half of that story is true. She fell asleep on our dates continuously.
Well,
and
you've managed to do plenty of that on some of the dates that I've had with you since. But,
yeah.
So you got married in August 1981. Where were you living at the time?
Ivor Heath, my friend.
Ivor Heath.
Isn't it? Aren't you supposed to have had a second piece of music by now, Russell?
Well, I'm just getting to that.
Just checking. Ivor Heath in Buckinghamshire, where I was teaching in a special school.
Wait a minute. Tell us about why Hallelujah is your.
Because I love it.
You love it. Okay.
I love it. In a way, Leonard Cohen. Whilst I was interested in radical ideas in my teen years in university.
Hang on. Let's just enjoy a few bars.
And then I just give some thoughts on it. Yeah.
I've heard there was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord. But you don't really care for music, do you? It goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, the major lift, the baffled king composing hallelujah.
I won't embarrass you by asking to complete the song, but you were talking about Ivor Heath, and that was when you were working, is it Drominer School? Is that how you pronounce it?
Drominer School. Yeah, another institution that's probably been shut up. Almost everything I worked for got shut up eventually. Yes, that was it. That was nice. It allowed us to save money, which allowed us to put down the deposit. The answer to David Levinson's question is no, the London Board of Jewish Religious Education was created at the end of the Second World War to put together Jewish education after all the children had been evacuated, although Sydney was treasurer, David. It allowed us to save money because we lived in subsidised ILEA housing, which allowed us to put down a deposit on a house in North Harrow, so we started going to Pinner Shul, which was very suitable in many ways because it was the first shul I'd known, because my parents lived in Rayners Lane briefly when Dad was manager of a a shop there. So we had a couple of good years in North Harrow, although the work was, as I say, in a tough place in Watford. It was whilst we were there, I think the story is worth telling, that we got done for tax evasion. Both of us were salaried employees, and we were called in to HMRC in Slough. And he was sitting there with this bloke with these tax stuff in front of us. Said, have you declared all your income? I said, well, we're salaried employees. Yes, we have. But you obviously think we haven't. So tell me what it is you think we haven't declared. So he said, I've got here the records of the Ruislip crematorium. And in those days, possibly still today, I don't know, doctors had to sign a certificate of death if somebody had passed away and was to be cremated. And the hospital paid you £10, attractively called ash cash. And what they didn't do, bizarrely, considering that everybody was an employee and salaried, is they didn't deduct tax. So he sat there and said, how many of these have you signed? I mean, you got 10 quid. Barbara must have signed half a dozen, if that. So we said whatever it was. So we got the tax, interest, and a fine. He said, I suppose you think this is trivial. I said, no, I want you to go to my holiday home in Bermuda so we can discuss this in further detail. So that was the first opportunity. And that was from the Undertakers, says Barbara. I just on the chat. And that was my first opportunity to go to a desert island, was to discuss our tax affairs. The following year, when I put down £200 for Barbara's medical books, and I got a phone call from HMRC challenging again. And I explained that medical books were very expensive in those days. So they were 50 quid a pop. And he kept saying it couldn't possibly be. And I kept saying we had. And eventually I said, let's compromise. I will pay tax on them, but I promise you that all of Barbara's tax, any patients that she's got that work for HMRC will have last year's medicine. And he burst out laughing. And that was, we got away with that one. Rightly so, because we weren't falsely claiming anything.
So from Ivor Heath, you moved to Gisborne House in Watford.
Yeah, that was the place which was dreadful.
That was the dreadful place.
And then the LBJRE, which started my love affair with Jewish education and working for Jewish schools and other phenomena in the Jewish community. And here we got pictures of some of the schools that I was associated with. The bottom on the right-hand side, I think that must have been Sir Michael Sobell's 89th birthday, and with the late Lord Jacobowitz, Zichrono Livracha, we actually went to celebrate his 100th birthday, and he showed us his sit-sit. It was quite amazing. Wolfson Hillel was the first school I had the privilege to be project director of to open. You've got an aerial view of JFS on the right. And this picture on the left was like absolutely bizarre. It's King, the chief late Jonathan Sachs, Livracha, King Hussein of Jordan, Livracha, and Alan Sugar, Lord Sugar, sorry. You'd find me for getting it wrong. And I was standing at King Solomon and school, and we were watching the funeral of Yitzhak Rabin, and King Solomon spoke so eloquently. And Alistair Falk was there at each time, said, we've got to get this guy here. So I wrote a letter to the Jordanian ambassador asking if the king would open the technology wing of King Solomon High School. And 7 months later, we got a phone call. It's His Majesty's secretary here. His Majesty would like to fly in. It was the first intimation we had of anything. So we're going to send his helicopter pilot down to check stuff. So the king came to open the technology wing of the school. This isn't being publicly recorded, I suppose. The chief rabbi sat at tea table with the king and Alan Sugar and said, that man has got no conversation. And he wasn't talking about King Hussein, I can tell you. But it was important to me then, as it is now, that even in the most difficult of times, we have as good relations as possibly we can with people of other faiths, particularly those with whom we so often find ourselves at enmity. So I was very pleased to be engaged in working with these schools.
So all those schools you've had more than just a passing interest in, and a really huge involvement in the development of the physical facilities, and a lot more behind the scenes. And you know, as if you didn't have enough to do in the world of Jewish education, you found time in your spare time, such as it was. You were clerk to the governors of several Jewish schools in the 1980s and the 1990s. So when you look back on your work in Jewish education, what is it that you feel most proud of? Because, you know, any one of these would have been dayenu enough.
I was just pleased to be a part of it. I try not to. When I see the buildings, I feel good about it. But one of the lessons you learn is that communities have to move on. Schools are. When I showed people around JFS shortly after being built, and they were marveling at it, I would always say at the end, "This building looks fantastic. It is. We're doing the best we possibly can for your children." But in 1943, Janusz Korczak was giving his best in education to children in the bombed out Warsaw ghetto. And it's the quality of education and care that comes from people, not buildings. I'm glad that I was engaged in providing these buildings, but it's so much more important to me that our children have as much opportunity as they can with quality educators. It's people.
It's the software.
It's people that count.
The software, not the hardware.
And I'll just jump, because otherwise there might not be a logical place for it. Talking of Warsaw, I think my background as a child of a refugee, and I first heard about it at uni with the plight of Soviet Jewry. And Barbara and I went to Moscow and Leningrad, as it then was, in the when things were about to get better but weren't yet, and it was tough. Barbara was strip searched. We were followed. We were given a tough time by our English tour guide. Hope you aren't one of those religious people causing problems. I felt it was part of the debt that I had living in freedom. December 1985, thank you, Barbara. The living in freedom to be able to support people who had been imprisoned for their values and their commitment to Jewish life. It's not easy to pray to God, and it's not easy to know if God is listening. And I might make that point in regard to musical items I've chosen. But I do remember standing in Moscow, just praying for these people to have a better life. They deserved better than that had been delivered to them in the 20th century. As one guy once said to me, Eliyahu Zarkin, remember, first Hitler, then Stalin. It was more than a person could really take. And I was very proud that, I mean, if you want me to talk that period about pride, very proud to be involved in Soviet Jewry, still very friendly with some of the people that we made friends with in Minsk. Really glad that we could do that. And I hope as things settle down that we can commit to helping other Jewish communities, particularly impressed by Rafi's story about Ethiopian Jewry and the guy who introduced us to, who is looking at Jewish communities, isolated Jewish communities around the world, in particular Uganda, which is set a place where I hope that eventually we can get engaged with.
Well, it sort of leads us into Belmont, but I just want to get there by way of where you went to after having left your full-time role in Jewish education and became the CEO of the Sam and Bella Seba Charitable Trust. Tell us a little bit more about what the work is that you do with the trust.
Well, I didn't, because I'm now retired. As you know, it was giving money away, half of it in Israel and half of it in the United Kingdom. These are charities that we were involved with. Two of them have actually been Belmont Kol Nidre appeal charities. This year it was the Association of Rape Crisis Centres in Israel, which does magnificent work in supporting women who've been abused. The one at the bottom represents, I guess, part of a theme of my life about giving opportunities to people whose bodies are not as strong as ours might be. And this is a charity. On the bottom right-hand side, the lady at the top, she's standing on a platform. You can't see, she's almost half the height of the chap there. She's CEO of a charity called Inbar, which focuses on creating a social life for people whose bodies are not as strong as they could be, and organizes date nights and have the sukhus to help some people get married. It's a wonderful charity. And the picture above is relates to another one of the charities that we work with called Milbat, which creates assistive technology products, and IKEA picked up one of their products. So that was very helpful. At the bottom left-hand corner, this is a Muslim, Jewish or Arab Jewish cooperation charity in the Negev. Never was it more needed than at the moment. And I'm very pleased that some of the charities that we work with on shared society are not giving in to some of the hatred that has exploded and continues to explode in the Middle East. And Khair on the right-hand side is a Bedouin with his MBA from Canada. And Khair, actually, I think Rabbi Feldman interviewed Khair at Belmont, or maybe talked about meeting Khair Elbaz there. We need a peaceful society, and we need integrated societies where people respect each other. And in a way, all these images are about respect, respecting women and not treating them as objects of lust, respecting those whose bodies are not as strong as they might be, respecting the other who have different backgrounds. I think that is so important. And I was very grateful that the Sever Trust gave me the opportunities to go to Israel 3-4 times a year and meet wonderful people doing wonderful work.
So your love of Israel, not in question. Your love for your Judaism has also grown over the years, and your third piece of music might be a slightly unusual choice.
Which one is it going to be, Russell? You move them all around.
Well, it's Chazan Barry Lightman.
Oh, Baruch Hashem.
Diane Barry Lightman, singing Hashem, Hashem. So just tell us why that is significant to you.
I like Barry's voice.
Okay.
I love Barry's voice. We've got another piece from another member of the Belmont community, probably the one after this. I love the atmosphere in Shul when Barry sings Hashem, Hashem. It's different than the next piece. There's more a different kind of togetherness than the second piece. We pray for God's mercy. We hope for God's mercy at all time. And when I hear Barry's voice, it will remind me on a desert island that in Belmont, I mean, basically Barbara and our life has shrunk socially. We've hardly got any friends now outside Belmont. All our friends are in Belmont, and I know that if either of us had a problem, there are a score of people we could phone and say, we just need your help on something. And we know they would respond without a doubt. And I know that that's true of most of the members of our community, that they've got friendships. They could rely upon people in Belmont. And I think that would remind me not of God, only of God's mercy, but of growing up in Belmont. Our children, we were so pleased that our children grew up at a golden time for young people in Belmont. We've got less now, but the kids still, those that we got left in the children's service, which is much smaller, but they bond with each other. And that's a reflection of how adults bond with each other in Belmont. And we could not have, I feel like we could not have lived in a happier place. And that is a reminder of that.
Okay. Here we go.
Hashem, Hashem, El Rachum v'Chanun, Erech Ha'ayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Emes, Notzer Chesed Lo Elohim, נוסע המון בפשע וחטא ונקי.
I'm going to stop it there. But we all had the pleasure of hearing Barry sing those very words on Tuesday morning.
Indeed.
So we're
indeed.
now firmly in Belmont.
Yes, so we are.
So you moved from North Harrow, which is curiously enough, again, coincidences. We were living in North Harrow at the same time that you were living in North Harrow. And we were also going to Pinnershall, probably as frequently as you and Barbara were going to Pinnershall, which is why we never met there.
I ended up working for the London Board of Jewish Religious Education. I was there every week.
So you joined Belmont in June 1985. So when was it that you realized you needed to spend as much time on community matters as you did in your proper working life?
Going to the children's service. Ian was taking it, the late Ian Weiner, Zichron Livrachah, and Eric, I've forgotten the surname.
Rendell.
Thank you. And I thought, I don't think Eric had kids at the time. No. I thought, my children are going here. Why has this chap got to do this? I should be doing it to support my children. But the truth is, and it's a dangerous thing to say in the current era, but I love children. My father loved children. Kids is what gives me such pleasure. I know that when we used to have communal dinners and all our friends were sitting together talking, I would go and sit on the kids' table. I was much more interested in what they had to say. And I remember the look of a bemused shock on Carol Hart's face as there I was sitting with the kids again, rather than the adults. But I love the company of kids. So that was one strand. The Soviet strand was definitely about having the sense of refugee background and wanting to give back to Jews less fortunate than myself. And the other was professional work. And if you're going to do a job, do it well.
Well, no one can accuse you of not doing anything well that you've done for us in Belmont since you joined in '85. And I suppose having had a spell on the board and as chairman and probably vice chairman as well, we sort of come to the latest project that you've been spearheading and so forth, the refurbishment of our shul building, and if that wasn't enough, the gardens as well. So which aspect of the project gave you the most pleasure, and perhaps which aspect gave you the most angst? I'm just going to put up a photograph just in case we've forgotten what the shul used to look like. I didn't think that it was you up the ladder, by the way, but
it wasn't. I don't think it was. Okay, so I've got a confession as Anthony. I know Anthony Broser's on the call. I've got a confession about this, which I've never shared with Anthony. Okay, it was the moment of relief and angst. Okay, as you know, we have these fantastic glass panels at the front. And the guys who we found to put the whole thing together had actually built it off-site. The entire front that you can see was built in Ware in Hertfordshire. That's not a question. It's W-A-R-E, built in Ware in Hertfordshire to make sure it worked. And they brought it here. And when they showed me the glass panel, if you go up close, and you can see it to this day, if you go up close, it's pixelated. And you have to be back 2, 3, 4 yards to get the proper image. And I thought, whoops, if this doesn't work, we've spent an awful lot of money for it not, and it's not like we can do something about it. And it was when I saw the sample, it was very pixelated, and I took a deep breath that they assured me it would work, which it did. I tell you, the bit that gives me, I love the beautiful things. The bit that gave me most pleasure was, and newer members of the show won't remember this, but in the skylights up above, they were getting more and more darker and darker as the sun interacted with the polychrome material. And eventually I found somebody who could make it at the curve of our shawl. And that first day when the sunlight came through, it actually got me anxious. As it was darkening, it felt like a physical sickness, like a pigmentation of the eye. And I really was miserable personally about it getting darker and darker. And when that sunlight came through, here comes the sun, that was an enormous moment of pleasure. I will say, they say that a camel is a horse designed by a committee. And you might think that putting together a project like this with a committee would be a nightmare. And there were moments of angst. But I tell you, just with the latest one, which is the image you're going to see next, the Jerusalem canopy that's just gone up, every single member of the committee commented on one aspect of it or another when they saw the first draft, and each person actually gave a positive suggestion about how it should appear. And that was quite remarkable. And I think symptomatic and symbolic of Belmont, that it wasn't negative comments. It was, I don't think that works. I don't think this works. I think this would work. I think the other would work. And they were right. And it did work. And actually, it was done by a cousin of a member of ours, who herself was a Soviet Jew who made it to Israel. That isn't why I chose her. I'd seen her work and it was beautiful. And everything that we did went past the committee first. Sometimes it took some time to get to agreement, but we did. And we did it in a spirit of harmony. It took longer. Originally, when a plan was drawn up, we thought it would take 3 or 4 years. It took 7 years. Originally, we planned it to be 200K with a 100K loan from the United Synagogue. It turned out to be 350K. And if the refurb committee were a unity, there were more than 150 families in the shul contributed to the refurb. And that was, again, symptomatic of the pride and pleasure that Barbara and I take in Belmont, that everybody was in this together and giving some people who didn't have much money, giving something that I was, sometimes quite astonished by, and others, the biggest donors are anonymous and quite remarkable. So it actually, the light, here comes the sun, and the pleasure of being part of a shul, which is a team, a community, which is a team. That's the bit that I take most pride in.
I want to share something with you before I put that image up, and we can talk a little bit more about that. But I want to share this comment, and I hope that everybody can read this quite clearly. But this is the heartfelt comment that when I asked one of your committee, what was it like to work with David? This is what he came up with.
I thought it was me that had said that.
I beg your pardon?
I thought that was me who said that.
Always listening to the advice and recommendations of the other members of the committee. I can't think of another committee where someone would say that about the driver. An affable, larger than life character. It's difficult not to like David. Well, it really is difficult not to like David. And I was really, really touched when I received this and wanted to share it with the rest of the 47 or however many families are tuned in.
Thank you, Russell. Thank you.
But here we go. This is the pride of place at the back of the shul. And if nothing else, I hope this encourages people who've yet to make it back to shul to just come and experience it, because it is a stunning piece of art. Tell us a little bit more about what it represents.
Well, there's a couple of things. Firstly, you're looking at it one way up, but it can be turned upside down, and it will every 6 months. Secondly, every single building on there is a real building. It's an artist's interpretation, but you at some point might do it as a quiz, sub-question, or something, identify which buildings these are in Jerusalem. One or two of them are on the outskirts. The songs are songs that we sing on Simchas Torah, Simcha et Yerushalayim Giluva, and Ki Mitzion Teitzei Torah. The old and the new, heritage and looking forward. It's about those. If you look at the colors, it was a suggestion from Anthony Broza. that we must make sure that the colours match the colours of the panels at the front, and the lady transformed what she'd created to provide this kind of wash, gentle wash of blue and pink and gold. I picked up the idea in schools in the States, where they hold a Jerusalem canopy over the children at Simchas Torah, and then for the rest of the year they have it up as a decoration on a wall. And I thought that was an absolutely brilliant idea. Its size is controlled by the size of our bimmer. It happens that it fitted onto the back wall rather well, but in future you won't need two to lace in. We're going to get special poles so that Graham Morrison Wood doesn't have to stretch his arms out so much to hold it up. Getting it up there was quite a performance. Salvador was in Argentina, and we hope that his sister's doing okay. I know Salvador and Stuart and I and a couple of others, we had to have poles specially made to lift it off. It's quite a challenge, but it's there's lovely songs about Jerusalem, which is so important to Barbara and I. If you print off your copy of Belmont, there's an image of it, and then you turn it upside down as well and see how many buildings you can identify. And please God, it won't be L'Shana Bar Yerushalayim, but Barbara and I are booked for next Tuesday, and please God, we'll get to Jerusalem sometime in the next few days.
So you mentioned the next. Actually, you didn't mention the next piece. You mentioned the piece after the next piece. But for this piece, you've chosen a piece of Beethoven.
Yeah.
And you know,
there is a reason. There is.
I'm thinking that, you know, does this have anything to do with your magnus opus of the Schul's renovation project? No,
nothing whatsoever. It's to do with knowing that you can't be right all the time. And it first came to mind when I was at Chicago, and I was making a presentation at a seminar with another chap, and he'd done a brilliant piece of research which led to changes in education systems, actually. Brilliant statistical piece of research. And I'd done a historical thing, and I didn't have a single statistic. And I had to follow him after he'd been absolutely brilliant. I'd done a paper on the history of the American teachers' trade union movement. And when I got up there, I was ashamed because he'd done so much. So I said, I've only got one statistic. And I wrote the number 7 on the board. I said, I'll get to it in due course. And I'm doing a history of the American teachers' union movement with American accents and English accents. And I stop at one point, and I said, we now get to my statistic 7. I said, it's very important. I said, there are 7 minutes left to go for the rest of my paper. Everybody burst out laughing. I felt a bit badly that I'd spoofed him a bit, but it was a spoof against myself for not having done the kind of work he had done. But afterwards, I felt like, whoa, I got through this. And there was sort of that da-da-da-da moment that I got away with something. But it will also remind me of last summer when Lawrence and I were playing table tennis, and I was allegedly at work but couldn't get into the office. And it's a reminder of how wrong you can be, because whenever we got to the score 18-12, both of us thinking that this was the 1812 overture, would go da-da-da-da, and eventually it dawned on us it was Beethoven's 5th. So it was a reminder, even when I was beating him 1812, I got it completely wrong. And you should always remember, chances are you're going to get things completely wrong. Okay, that's it, the explanation for Beethoven's 5th.
I'm going to stop it there because time needs us to move on.
We only need the da-da-da-da bit.
Well, exactly. I love this photograph. You don't know I've got it, but I love it.
I saw Barbara snuck some stuff in, don't worry.
Yeah,
That's as if his wedding.
What? Well, I could tell you were probably propped up on a chair or something. So with everything that is going on in your life, what do you do to enjoy yourself, with or without Barbara?
I love gardening, find it very therapeutic. Barbara and I love traveling. We are followers of the bunts in lots of different ways. Wherever the bunts go, we try to get there eventually. So we're hoping to go to the Galapagos. We went to Costa Rica. We went to Machu Picchu, and Australia and New Zealand. So we really enjoy our traveling. And the show has taken up an enormous amount of my time over the last 6 months, but the lockdown was convenient, and hopefully we'll get back to traveling again, as I say, on Tuesday.
On Tuesday, yeah.
And that will give us the enjoyment of our grandchildren in due course. But that was at Zip's wedding, and that was.
Well, we've got some more pictures of the kids and the grandchildren and so forth coming up. But, you know, I think people will be absolutely flabbergasted that if the work that you do for Belmont isn't enough, you volunteer at a residential centre for the elderly demented, you know, visiting people who are excluded from seeing their family because of the pandemic. Where is this place?
I go to the Jewish care home. It's where Dad was, the campus where Dad was. And I guess people's relatives are now going to gradually get back in. But I'm visiting some people whose relatives have not been able to visit them. There's one chap there who's a professor of a university. He doesn't remember that he taught at university. He doesn't remember what he taught. He doesn't remember where he was at. It's absolutely terrible. And there's another chap there with whom I have great conversations, who just needs a bit of love and care. And I'm pleased to do it. I always did first night Seder there whenever I could. There was a Sidorim before Yom Tov. I was pleased to be able to do that from the time that Dad was there. Dad was there for 10 years, 10 tough years. Mum kept him alive with her love. Remarkable model for me of what a spouse should do. And if I can do a quarter of that for Barbara, then I feel that I would have done enough. This is us in New Zealand. We were traveling last year. Who remembers such things? On a concrete go-kart course in Queenstown, where we were with Shosh and Aaron. It was great fun. And if anybody fancies a 30-hour flight around the world, New Zealand was a stunningly beautiful place.
And talking of Shosh, presumably this is also in New Zealand, or?
Very close. No, this is in St Albans. We went for a cycle ride a few weeks ago along a great track from St Albans to Hatfield Galleria. And I strongly commend it. It's a lovely walk or a cycle ride on a disused train line. So the chances are there aren't going to be any trains there. And somebody has actually done up one of the old platforms, made it absolutely beautiful. And you've just reminded me that one of my hobbies in the lockdown has been cycling. I've cycled it into town. Sometimes I take the train in and then cycle all around the South Bank. It was very easy and not risky. At the start of the lockdown, there were so few cars around. I went a few weeks ago with Aaron. We went as far around as Lambeth Palace, Vauxhall Bridge, past Tower of London and so on. And here, of course, is a lovely picture of Mum, who was 94. She doesn't mind anybody knowing. She always tells people anyway. Who, Baruch Hashem, lives independently and has been in a bubble with us. And that was Shoshi's birthday. She's very pleased that she got a really good Barbie birthday cake for her birthday. It's not quite as old as Grandma, to say the least. But it's lovely.
So we're going to come on to our last piece, our last segment, which is really to focus on the family. But before we get there, your next piece of music reflects your close friendship and communal working relationship with Anthony Broser. Now, Anthony here is singing Kol Nidre. So why this piece of music in particular?
Because it is a moment of spectacular quiet in Belmont. The entire community, whether people are observant or not, the sense of awe as Anthony starts singing Kol Nidre. And as I said, it's not, I don't find it easy to speak directly to God. But as Anthony starts Kol Nidre and as we go through it, there is a feeling of inspiration, the possibility of meeting the divine, and how grateful we are to be in Belmont, where there's such an amazing atmosphere, and how self-sufficient we are largely in our chazanut and in our laning, not entirely anymore, but it's pretty good. And I love Anthony's voice as well. And Kol Nidre is just, it's a spine-tingling piece for most Jews.
Let's enjoy that for a few seconds. And just before we get there, talking of children and introducing things, this looks like you muscling in on one of Dov's outings with his YU colleague, Rabbi Soloveitchik.
Yeah, it's hard to believe we actually saw Dov last year in 2020. He was here for 3 days, and Rabbi Soloveitchik took us to the National Gallery. And here's a remarkable story. The National Gallery had all its paintings put into a coal mine for protection against bombing. And eventually it brought back one painting, and the painting belonged to a Jewess. I think it was a portrait of her. It was and people queued for hours outside the National Gallery just to see this one painting. And Rabbi Soloveitchik brought over a bunch of younger Americans and our son, and for a cultural tour of London and with a Jewish perspective. And he was talking about this. And this is the last time we were in the physical company of Dov, other than the following evening when we were at Met Suyan with them all, with Barbara and Mum as well, which was also a great evening.
All right, let's enjoy that little bit of music. It seems a shame to have to cut him off in his prime, but I'm sure you will all forgive me.
So we'll all be together this Yom Kippur in one place to pray.
So we're going to now focus on your family, and we want you to talk us through the various members who are featured in this selection of photographs that I managed to wrestle out of you and your dear wife. So tell us about them. Tell us about the children, their spouses, who they married, what they do, what their spouses do.
Okay, well, the first thing is, the place I worked in Chicago was psychoanalytically orientated, deeply influenced by Freud and so on, and he continues to be. It structures a lot of my thinking. So I do have to take into account that all of my children married somebody who wasn't from the United Kingdom, and 2 of them, then mine left the country, left the continent, and I have to wonder about why that was. But there we go. On the left, it's Shosh and Aaron. Aaron was born in Antwerp and moved to Manchester, and they've been happily married now for 4 years, and they're the two that haven't left me. Shoshi reminds me regularly that I need to keep on her right side, as she's the one who's going to choose my old people's home. And when I do good things, I get a window in my room, and when I get bad things, she takes the stairs away. And Shosh, in a remarkable sense of continuity, both from Sydney, my father-in-law, dad, teaches at JFS, and so we've had a family connection with the school going back now to about 1930, and that's a source of great pride. At the top is Daniel with zips. Daniel was born in Holland and decided to move to Israel. I met him, it was a shidduch. And I met Daniel after he'd met Zippy for 5 or 6 days, in which time he'd been to London and actually met Barbara for work. And then he met me, and Zippy had told him, don't talk about marriage and stuff, which has been known each other about 5 or 6 days. And Daniel said to me, so what do you want out of a son-in-law? As he'd been told not to raise the topic. And I said, I want somebody who smiles. So Daniel works very hard to use an expression not always possible to use in Israel. He's a learner and an earner. He learns very hard every day. Remarkable levels he's achieved. I didn't tell you what Aaron does, sorry. He's a computer geek of some kind. I have no idea what he does, but he's doing stuff with software and he does it very well. That's all I know. Dov went to university at YU, Yeshiva University, from Alon Shvut from Yeshiva High at Sion, and that he met Miriam on the only mixed gender program that was run by Yeshiva University. 6 boys and 6 girls went to California each year, and Dov was the one who came back with a marriage partner, Miriam, the lovely Miriam. She teaches at a Jewish high school. She teaches Limudei Kodesh. Dov, who's on, back on again, I see, had to drift off for something or other, is the Rav of Young Israel and Jamaica Estates. When I'm there, it reminds me very much of Belmont. Everybody chips in. They don't have to stack chairs, but everybody chips in. And although it's a community that's more affluent than our own, it never comes across like that. They're just really friendly, warm people. And I think they're very lucky, the two of them, to have ended up in a very lovely community. Anybody going anywhere near JFK Airport, they're only 7 miles away, do drop in at some time. So those are our children, of whom we're immensely proud. Oh, and what can we say here? So on the right-hand side, Orly Redhead. In the middle, Ariella Redhead, and Miriam and Dov there. My grandfather had red hair, and so did Sydney when he had hair. And actually, people don't know it, but I was known as Ginger when I was at primary school. I had red hair too. So that's the American kids. And I'm very pleased, by the way, sorry if you can just go back for a minute, but that Dov is teaching them English. So Ariella knows how to say banana and bath rather than banana and bath. So that's good. I'm hopeful of that one. And we go to the next one, and we've got Eliyahu and Aryeh. They look the same height, but the one on the left is about 1.5 years older. And there's young Moshe on the right-hand side. The boys are trilingual because they have Dutch, English, and Hebrew. It's only a matter of time before they have Yiddish as well, I suspect. So that's the 3 boys there. And there in the middle is Rachel, our granddaughter in Israel, Shabbat Ima. And kind of that reminds me of Belmont as well, where the kids were Shabbat Abba and Shabbat Ima at our nursery. And that was a few months ago. And that's lovely to see as well. And there's the 4 of them together. And if the first photo, Russell, is of my great-grandfather, and the last photos of my grandchildren, I know that I've done something that I would have wished to do with Barbara in creating a family where our heritage is strong, and most importantly, and I guess that reflects something about the refurbishment of the school and building Jewish schools, it's all about the future. I don't know what the future holds, but work for the future. And we do that through family and through children and through education. So my final song, music, as you know, will be my grandchildren singing, as Carol did as well. That's them in the garden who remember such things.
Seder, we celebrate with matzah, maror, and a Seder plate. Money stand up 4 cups of wine. We eat the afikomen, and we all recline. Yay!
So tell me, what American accent was that?
Well, unfortunately, I've tried to explain to Ariella that she shouldn't talk like she comes from New Jersey.
So the last piece of music, we couldn't just stop there. This is a little bit long, and with your indulgence,
yeah, just a few seconds.
Watch some of this.
Shabbat. Yofi, the great combination of the whole song.
Thanks, Russ. You don't have to
it really is time to wind this up and bring everything to a close. So, David, we're on a desert island. You can't take any of these lovely people with you, unfortunately. What is the luxury item that you're going to have with you on your desert island?
Well, many of my friends know that I love my photo albums. So I'm going to take with a gigantic album of all my photographs that I can remember my darling wife, my mum, all the kids, the grandchildren, and look at those photographs, and that will be absolutely splendid. It's an unusual photograph album, Russell, because at the back it's got a Hebrew dictionary and grammar, so I can improve my Hebrew.
Let's hope you'll have an occasion to use it. So, is there a book to go with this luxury item?
No, that was my book. Sorry, that was my book. The luxury item, a digital camera with a year's supply of battery. So I can make another photograph album. This is me when I was stranded.
Very good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you will agree that our journey on the desert island with David has been an absolute tour de force. Thank you so much for being with us this evening, David. I've thoroughly enjoyed learning more about you, and I hope that our community will continue to appreciate the wonderful work that you do, and not only that you do, that Barbara does for us all now as Vice Chairman of the community, and that we share the pride in your children and in their families that they have now founded, and that they have in turn spread the Lerner name and reputation far broader than you could have ever imagined. Ladies and gentlemen, David Lerner.
Thank you very much indeed, Russell. It's been good fun. Really enjoyed myself. And Tina, I'm going to leave one of the photograph albums to you.
Wow, thank you so much, David. That was just unbelievable. And thank you, Russell. David, you're a hard act to follow in so many ways.
You'll be doing it next week, Barbara.
Exactly, my point.
Okay. Thank you all very much for tuning in, and a very good night from me.
Good night,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Much. That was wonderful.
Good night.
Night. Say good night, Gracie.
Good night, Gracie.
Good night, Gracie. Where's Gracie? Gracie. Oh, everyone's going now. Okay.
So everybody's going now.
Yeah, everybody's going.
Everybody's going. Oh, sorry about that.
Good night, Barbara.
So thank you, Speakers Corner people.
Russell, I must congratulate you. An amazing presentation, a wonderful interview.
Well done. Thank you very much.
Absolutely excellent.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Valerie, did you manage to see it in the end? You're on. You're
He's on mute. Yeah.